Good evening, and once again, welcome to the Shadow Gallery. I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly. Or am I? Because tonight, on this very special edition of New Comics, bitches! We are going to discuss really the only new comic this week. Let's face it, it's really the only comic worth talking about. It's the only comic anybody is talking about, so let's talk about it. That comic is, of course, Amazing Spider-Man number 700. The finale, the grand finale to the Amazing Spider-Man title. Now, well, okay, let me rephrase that. I won't say it's the grand finale. It's the finale of this iteration of The Amazing Spider-Man. For those of you who have not read it yet, don't watch this video. Although I can't imagine that there's anybody out there, A, who hasn't read it, or B, is totally in the dark when it comes to this issue. Now, the only video review that I've seen of this, of us in the comic book community, is that of Agent 42Q. And did you leave a comment on, speaking of you, Agent 42Q, did you leave a comment on Comics Alliance in regards to this book? Because it was a very hateful comment as far as this book was concerned. And it was entitled Wednesday Serial, so I thought it might be you. So if it was you, I'm James Cranky Man, so, on comicsalliance.com. So, anyway. So, for those of you who watched his video, he really didn't like it. For those of you who are about to watch my video, I'm going to tell you this is filled, jam-packed with spoilers. So, like I said, if you haven't read it, don't watch, okay? Come back after you've read it. Or don't listen, whatever. So, what do we have going on here? Obviously, as we've seen set up through the last three, really the only three issues that matter, 698, 699, and now 700, that Doc Ock, Otto Octavius, has switched memories, or has implanted his memories in Peter Parker's body, and has planted basically Peter Parker's memories inside of his own dying body, who of course he's about to blow his porch light, as far as Doc Ock's body is concerned. And we had some predicaments, of course, over the course of the last two issues. We had Spidey really, not behaving uncharacteristically, at least for the most part, but there's some of, there's obviously there seems to be a lot of Spidey still there, but whatever his grand scheme is, I mean, I'm of two minds about this book. One mind of mine says this wasn't as well thought out as it could have been, or perhaps even should have been, because there are some problems. First of all, what was his end game, other than to allow essentially Peter Parker to die in his body? So, because we never really find out about what his long game was, is what, because obviously he's doing, he's doing the long con here. He's going to pretend to be Spider-Man for, one would assume, a certain amount of time, and then eventually he's going to reveal his true colors and do whatever it is that he would do. What that is, we don't know, and we never will know, really. Well, we might find it, to be fair. So there are some issues with this story. The other part of me really loved the shit out of this book. It's an extremely well-told story as far as the issue itself is concerned. Even the backups by J.M. DeMatteis and Stephanie Jen Van Meter and Stephanie Buscema and I can't remember who did the art for the DeMatteis clip there. But you have, at its essence, at its core, the core story, of course, is the final battle of Spider-Man and Doc Ock. We have some very interesting things that happen along the way. For instance, the issue starts with what basically seems like a prelude to Peter and MJ getting on. And this is a source of much controversy. The legality of this, the whole kind of having sex with a person basically under false pretenses, in some countries is considered rape. And so it begs the question, is this just, is this part of the plan, again, to just subvert Peter's whole life, or just to take advantage of everything that Peter has? So that was kind of the first... okay, I won't say the first afterthought that I had after reading it. But it seemed to me, it was uncomfortable in not the best way. So, essentially, to that, I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer to that particular issue. I'd like to hear Dan Slott kind of weigh in on this particular controversy, because it is kind of all over the place right now. Seems to be the second biggest thing that people are making an issue out of in this particular issue, is that, would that have been rape? I don't know. It's certainly not good, and it was uncomfortable to read. And then you have, these moments of Peter kind of saying these very uncharacteristic Peter things. And then you have Doc Ock on the other end of the spectrum, with Peter in control, doing uncharacteristic things for him. Like, obviously, he's still in league with Hydra Man and Paste Pot Pete and the Scorpion. And you have him kind of thinking like a supervillain, but without the unnecessary bloodletting. He's basically, when he goes to retrieve the gold Octobot from the police evidence locker, or lockup, if you will, he's telling them not to hurt anybody. And we have the suspense build to the climactic confrontation at Avengers Tower, where Peter is basically, he is absconded with, as Doc Ock, he has, or I should say Doc Ock as Peter, or as Spider-Man, has absconded with pretty much all of the supporting players of the Spider-Man universe. He's taken Jonah, he's taken Aunt May, he's taken Mary Jane, he's taken everybody. People that work at the Bugle, Ben Urich, who's even in there. So you have this going on, and then you have Peter who's trying to think of what Ock's big move is going to be, and of course, the best thing that he can think of course, is to get the Octobot, is to and then to switch back. and put Ock back into, you know, his own brain, his own dying body, and then go back into his. And of course, we have this this sequence, which I found to be very heartfelt. Some people found it to be sanctimonious, is the word that some people used, in which Peter is basically in heaven, because as Doc Ock, he dies. He dies for about 3 minutes. And he goes to heaven, and it's basically, you know, Forest Hills. And he's walking around his neighborhood, and he's getting kind of hellos and pats on the back from some people that he saved, or some people, I should say, people that he's that have died while he's been Spider-Man, whether or not it's, you know, his explicit fault, or whether or not, you know, because we do get one character who gives a very specific rebuke, which is that of Silver Sable, who we do see in heaven, and we see, you know, Mom and Dad Parker. We see, you know, Nathan Lubinsky. You know, we see Alexei and Oksana. We see Marla Jameson, and then of course we end up seeing Uncle Ben. Now, as we see all of these different characters kind of throughout Peter's life, we get to see Peter at different parts of his life. You know, we start, he's, you know, he's young, he's still a teenager, and then as he meets, you know, people like, you know, George Stacy, and of course Gwen is there, and they're all saying, you know, you've earned this, you know, you've been a hero long enough, and it's time to, you know, it's okay, you can rest now, you've earned the rest, you've been fighting the good fight so long, it's time to just rest easy. And then Uncle Ben, of course, comes in and says, not yet. You can't come yet. You've got to go back, because you've got to put this right. And so then we get to Avengers Tower, and, you know, all hell sort of breaks loose, because, you know, Spidey's still definitely thinking as Doc Ock, but also knowing what Spidey knows, you know, overrides certain security protocols in Avengers Tower. And basically he is always at least one step ahead of Peter and his plans to do whatever he needs to do. And of course there's a part in that scene in the police evidence room in which Carly shows up and, you know, holds him at gunpoint, and she says, you know, basically, you know, he's trying to convince her that he is not that he's not Dr. Octopus, that he's, you know, that he's Spider-Man, and that, you know, she says, well, what's, you know, because usually the whole kind of spiel is, well, tell me something that only, you know, I would know about Spider-Man. And of course that ends up not working, and she opens fire on him, and then, you know, he kind of puts his, you know, his octo arms up, and bullets deflect off of that, and it's just a reflex that he does, and of course Carly gets hit in the shoulder, or in the arm, and that was where I was thinking, that's not so good. And I thought that Slott maybe could have been a little bit ballsier with that, and maybe, I don't know, put Carly in the hospital, at least, like, you know, maybe kind of hanging at death's door type of thing. But, you know, ultimately, I don't think Slott wanted to leave us with that bad of a taste in our mouths, collectively. Because you have, what I've seen from most of the reviews on the internet is that it's, you're either kind of in love with this book or you hate this book. There is no in between. I'm, again, like I said, I'm of two minds about this book. Because ultimately what we do have, like I said, I keep saying ultimately, and I'm sorry, but what we do get finally in the book is that Peter realizes there's nothing left to do. There's only one other thing that he can do, and that is he grabs Spidey and throws them both out the window. And, you know, he's essentially taking them both to their deaths. He has basically said, this is a line that I was never going to cross, but, you know, this is as desperate of a time as you could possibly make it, so, you know, this is something I have to do, because I cannot let you, let you, Doc Ock, you know, rule me in my body. I can't let you do that. And, of course, that doesn't work, because, you know, Doc Ock as Spidey uses his, you know, his web shooters, and he's, you know, he makes a big kind of a crash mat for them to both hit. And, of course, you know, Doc Ock suffers, you know, basically a fatal, you know, the final kind of straw that would break his back. And there are points that I think, again, maybe a little bit overlooked, because, you know, you see Spidey kind of acting bad. I mean, even, you know, to, you know, the people around him, you know, such as, you know, he's using impact webbing to shoot at just, you know, at people like, you know, some of the people from Horizon, at Mary Jane. But then when, you know, what I thought was interesting and kind of funny also was that when Scorpion busts into where everybody's hiding and is threatening the Jamesons, and then, of course, ends up threatening Aunt May, and not without good reason, because, you know, hey, Mac Gargan was just kind of a bum, you know, a two-bit hood before Jameson turned him into the Scorpion. And so in his desire for revenge, he singles out Jameson, then singles out, you know, Jay and May. But even Doc Ock's like, that's not going to happen. And he, bam, punches Scorpion's jaw clean off. And that's actually kind of that's the moment in which J. Jonah Jameson kind of says, wow, I never knew he had it in him. And he seems to gain kind of a strange respect for him at that point in time. Like, something about his ferocity in that moment actually makes Jonah respect him a little bit more, which I thought was very much in character for Jonah, because I think Jonah's come to kind of a comfortable place with Spider-Man. He's an Avenger. He's, you know, there must be something about him that's good, and obviously, you know, he saved, you know, his father, and he saved Aunt May, so, you know, he can't be bad. He can't be as bad as he's been thinking all of these years. So, but when going back to, you know, the crash, going out the window into the, you know, because even Spidey's thinking, well, you know, what, you know, why didn't I think of that ever? You know, when it's coming to this kind of scenario, why didn't I think of something like this? And, you know, it's at that point that you realize that, yeah, actually, Doc Ock has a couple of notches up on intelligence in the use of his quote-unquote arsenal, if you will, as far as, you know, certain situations are concerned. But it's a different kind of thought. You know, it's a different kind of thought process. You know, there's not a whole lot of trial and error that Ock uses. It's pretty much he knows the science of it. He knows that this will work. Because he is older, he is, you know, he is more experienced. He's not as Spider-Man, but just as someone who's, you know, who's devoted pretty much his entire life, you know, his entire thought is into being a supervillain, essentially. But as Peter's dying, essentially, as Doc Ock in his body, his last kind of Hail Mary is, he gets the Octobot to crawl back behind Doc Ock, or Peter, again, behind Spider-Man, and, try to inject, its little tentacles into the base of his skull so that they can switch back. But that doesn't work because, again, Doc Ock, he's ahead of the game. And because he's got this carbonatum, whatever, shielding back here. And so Peter's luck is essentially, the Parker luck has run out. There's nothing left. There's nothing left that he can do. He's going to die. But even in a spiritual sense, if you will, he won't go down without a fight. And what he basically does in these last few moments that he has is kind of, not shares, but just starts to seem to really reinforce the moments that have defined his life, of being a hero, of losing the people that he's close to, of the people that have died, whether he feels directly, because of him being Spider-Man, the people that, how precious each life is, and it's overwhelming Octavius. His mind can't wrap itself around being a good man anymore. It's been gone for too long, but because he's now in Peter Parker's body with Peter Parker's memories, Peter somehow initiates this flood of memories, like I said, of all these pivotal moments in his life that have formed who he is, and it basically not brainwashes, but it presents this whole new world to Otto, something that he never really had, because obviously, as a kid, he was very, looked down upon. As an adult, he was very looked down upon, and Peter never was really held up on a pedestal, certainly by any stretch of the imagination, but he always had the support of somebody. There was somebody looking out for him. And, if it wasn't Aunt May, it was, it was Robbie Robertson, or it was, Gwen, or it was Betty Brant, or it was, MJ, it was Harry, all these people in his life that did have his back. And I think that essence of who he truly is and what it truly means to be Peter Parker and to be Spider-Man is something that ultimately can override whatever's already in your head. Who you are, what you've done, it can all be essentially not wiped clean and start with a blank slate, but to atone. Because even Spider-Man, he's committed sins, and he knows what those sins are, and that's part of what he shares with Ock in his final moments. And indeed, Peter Parker, in the body of Otto Octavius, dies. And it is at that moment where Otto, in Peter Parker's body, with Peter Parker's kind of shared consciousness and with his memories, ultimately makes the decision that he will do what he can to honor this man's memory, this man that he never knew until these moments, and a man within himself that he never knew until these final moments. And that's where the book ultimately coalesces and ultimately works. And then we have the emergence of, we have someone who is of a superior intellect. Let's face it. I mean, a lot, more times than not, it's sometimes better to be lucky than good, and Peter has been lucky, but he's also been good. But so here's someone that, has this great intelligence, and a newfound respect for what it is to be a hero, that he doesn't have to always choose the wrong thing to do. He doesn't have to choose to be a bad man anymore. He can be a good man. And that is where ultimately the road to his redemption is going to lead, is that we will have Doc Ock as Spider-Man, as the superior Spider-Man. Now, the other two books, the other two stories that are in there, the one by J.M. DeMatteis is interesting. It's fun. It has this kind of almost alternate universe kind of tale. And the one thing that I really loved about it, and this is just on a personal note, is that part of it is actually set, if you read it, in a town in Illinois called Glenview. Well, Glenview, Illinois is the town in which yours truly was born. I was born there. I lived there for how long? A long time. 25 years of my life. I lived in, 24 years of my life. I lived in Glenview. So that was, I just thought a kind of a cool moment, obviously it's not like, DeMatteis was giving a shout out to me or anything like that, but it was just, I thought it was kind of a cool moment there. Because, I mean, how many places in the world can you pick? Well, you picked Glenview, Illinois, which happens to be my hometown. But I think that the story that they're telling is very interesting. This old man and his grandson, and this old man basically says, that he used to be Spider-Man, and it's, like I said, it's this very alternate universe kind of scenario, and there's a kind of wonder there. It's a really nice story, and then we have this really kind of oddball but really fun issue, a really fun story with Jen Van Meter writing and Stephanie Buscema doing the art on, where it's this very kind of Art Deco-y, tale about the Black Cat and Spider-Man, specifically about the Black Cat. We have all these cameos by different characters. It's kind of like this weird, kind of fun romance story. It's the kind of thing that I would like to, if they ever did kind of like an anthology series, like they did with Rocketeer, when they did Rocketeer Adventures. This would be the kind of story that would fit very well in there. It's kind of a weird story to put in this issue, but honestly, at some point in time, I think they just were kind of looking for room to fill. And of course, there is more filler because they have, it's an $8 issue, for Christ's sake. But, they have the cover gallery, which I have to agree with Matt, Agent 42Q, about that. Yes, it's totally unnecessary. I mean, how long ago did we have the cover gallery for this? So what do we latch onto from this? Obviously, this has set a new status quo for the character. It's eliminated Peter Parker from the book. So there were 4 things that I talked about today in my own post on Comics Alliance that I want to bring up here. I already brought up one, which is the question of rape. Question 2 is, because the thing that I hear from a lot of fanboys that I've seen a lot of comments and so on and so forth, a lot of criticism of this book, where it's saying, well, deaths don't mean anything there's no death in the comic book universe that has any kind of meaning. And the only one that ever had any kind of meaning as far as deaths were concerned, as far as heroes were concerned, was the death of Jean Grey. I would go even further than that. I would say that the death of Barry Allen was probably more effective. But we'll keep it confined to the Marvel universe for the time being. So Jean Grey seems to be kind of the sacred cow. Yes, I'm referencing Astonishing X-Men there. The sacred cow of the fanboys when it comes to deaths not having any meaning. Is that, she sacrificed herself and she didn't come back for, at least 10 years before she was resurrected. Well, this is where kind of the Flash metaphor works better. Is that there was a kid Flash, so it was easy for that, for Wally West to step into the Flash character post all of this insanity. It was, so I mean, that wasn't that much of a stretch to go from this person to this other person who's going to be taking their identity now and doing everything that they can to live up to the example that they set. And Wally West, to me, was a better Flash than Barry Allen ever was. He was a more interesting character. He was a more fun character. Everything about Wally West as the Flash worked so much better with Barry Allen gone. Which is why the New 52, again, it's a little bit problematic for me personally, because, I loved Wally West. And that's not just because of my love of everything Mark Waid, and, Brian Augustyn, a man I consider to be a friend, who was editing The Flash when Mark Waid took over, and really kind of became the kind of, Wally West really coming into his own. That era, where we had, the Terminal Velocity storylines, the return of Barry Allen, which is probably the greatest story of all time as far as Flash comics are concerned, in my opinion, anyway. But as far as Jean Grey is concerned, when people latch onto her, that's a bad decision when comparing it to other comic book characters like Peter Parker. There's no comparison between the two. Believe me, if Jean Grey had had her own title when she sacrificed herself to save the X-Men, save the universe, she would have been back a lot sooner than, the first issue of X Factor, or whatever the hell it was. She would have been back a lot earlier than her eventual return. But she was an ensemble player in an ensemble book, so you can't, it's apples and oranges, guys. You got to get over that. Of course, then that brings me to point 3, which is the inevitable and, predestined return of the dead character. Because we've had, in the last decade, we've had 2 major characters die. We've had Batman, Bruce Wayne, and Captain America, Steve Rogers, both dead. And within, 2 years? Something to that effect? They were both brought back. And to me, I really, in both cases, I thought they should have let the character breathe for a while as who they were. Because obviously you had Dick Grayson, who stepped in for Bruce Wayne and became Batman, and you had James Buchanan Barnes, who stepped in and became Captain America. Both of those characters, especially Bucky as Captain America, told much more compelling, much more interesting stories, for the most part, than any recent Bruce Wayne stories, certainly. And, well, in the case of Brubaker and Cap, really he did an excellent job with both. But I mean, we've seen, Steve Rogers for decades, So I think they should have given Bucky more time wielding the shield, as opposed to just, having, well, we got to bring Steve Rogers back. You just have to do it. And, we got to bring Bruce Wayne back because he's Bruce Wayne. And we have the New 52 coming up. So, I mean, that's why I won't necessarily say that the run on Detective is necessarily better. That, Snyder's kind of final, his whole run on Detective, the quote-unquote Black Mirror saga was better than what Snyder's doing right now. It's kind of almost parallel. They're both kind of equally great. There's more there's more immediacy to the stories that are being told now. That's for certain. With Bruce Wayne as Batman under Snyder's direction, but there was some also extremely compelling storytelling when it came to Dick Grayson, and just there's the potential for these characters to really go places as these, iconic characters. Dick Grayson, there is a much better case for Bruce Wayne's return than Steve Rogers. I will grant you that, because Bruce Wayne, you have this dynamic with one of the, I would say that the best reason to bring him back is because of Damian. It's because he has a son. Anyway, so I'm kind of getting off track here, but we will, as pretty much everybody has said, within 2, maybe 3 years max, we're going to get Peter Parker back. There's always a loophole. There's always some kind of cosmic loophole within the entirety of the comic book universe that allows a major character, if they die, to come back in a very short period of time, comparatively speaking. Then there's the fourth point, which is something that it does admittedly concern me, and that is no more, what I call the no more quips. It's just like Scarlet Witch saying no more mutants, or Hope and Scarlet Witch saying no more Phoenix. Basically, Dan Slott said, well, no more quips, because Spider-Man is now going to be Otto Octavius. So how do you deal with that? This is one of the defining traits of who Spider-Man is. He's the guy that cracks wise in the face of death. Well, let's take it to kind of a different point of view here. He has Peter Parker's memories. He's going to need to learn how to be more Peter Parker-ish than just, because, like I said, in this issue, he says a lot of things, quiet woman or silence woman, just all these things that are very out of character for Peter Parker to say. He's going to need to learn how to do that better. So we will get the quips, and I think that the fun thing about that is we'll get them in kind of an awkward way for a while. We are going to have a darker Spider-Man. We know that. We've known that for quite some time. But, is it going to be so dark that it forgets to have the funny parts? No. Dan Slott's really good with the comedy. I mean, there are some funny parts in this issue. Despite how kind of, how high the stakes are raised. It's just, I don't think that will be a problem. Really. When you really kind of cut down to it, I don't think that's going to be an issue. Ultimately, what we have here is a book that isn't perfect, because there are questions that need answering. Are they going to be answered in Superior Spider-Man? I don't know. I hope so. But the truth of the matter is, I don't know, you don't know. And we already have actually had our introduction to Superior Spider-Man in the last issue of Daredevil. So we have that being set up, which I thought was like, ooh, this is kind of an interesting tease that they're giving us here. But, of course, not knowing at that time who it is. And so I don't think that the Spider-Man that we know and love and have loved for all these years is going away. Do I agree that it not being Peter Parker anymore is going to be a detriment? Again, I don't know, but I understand the reasons why people think that. Because this is a character, he is very much an everyman. He is, he's been unemployed. He's had a hard time making the rent. He's, kind of keeps getting the shit end of the stick in just about every possible conceivable scenario over the years. So, I mean, how much better or worse can it get for him? I mean, even in this kind of final moment, he's defeated, but he's also won. And I know that sounds strange, because, I mean, you look at the evidence, he's dead. He's floated off. But, I mean, you have a chance for some really, really compelling storytelling to go on here. I know that we've had in the Spider Universe, we've had, Venom, and we have kind of a road to redemption story going on, even with Eddie Brock, we had that. We have Kane as Scarlet Spider. We have a road to redemption going on there. So is this kind of going to be following suit? Don't know. But again, it's an opportunity to tell a story in a different way that we might not have otherwise thought of. And that's really, I think, the essence of what Slott is looking to do, is to find a way to reinvigorate Spider-Man. Because let's face it, not the last year, but because Spider Island, I keep forgetting these things. It did actually take place partially in 2012, if memory serves correctly. I don't know. Because I know when I did my year-end wrap-up, there was stuff that did honestly just blow right past me. I did not think about it as well as I probably should have, but I'm not going back and changing anything. But Slott has kind of been running on fumes for a while, and we know that. And I thought it was a nice thing when he brought in Christos Gage to help out with the Danger Zone arc. And then just really, did some exciting things here with these last 3 issues. We can forget about 699.1. It doesn't exist. It's garbage. It's trash. It's flamed. It's nuked. It's whatever. It's a non-existent comic book, in my opinion. So this was kind of, depending upon what kind of fan you are of Spider-Man, this was either, this was a great Christmas gift, or it was a huge lump of coal in your stocking. More diehard fans of him, they seem to be the ones kind of crying foul the most. The more kind of, I wouldn't say fly-by-night fans, but I mean, because I have been, the first superhero that I ever wanted to be was Spider-Man. The first one that I ever wanted to be. And I didn't even really want to be Spider-Man. I wanted to be Peter Parker. Because he was, all into the science, and he was kind of nerdy, but he made nerdy seem kind of cool to me when I was 4 years old. And, you had the Spider-Man cartoon from the 60s, and then not too long after that, you had the Spider-Man, and then, which ended up becoming Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. And so, I mean, really, even before Batman, Spider-Man was the guy that I wanted to be. So believe me, I'm a fan of Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. I love Peter Parker. Am I going to miss Peter Parker? You bet your ass I am. But I'm also really interested in where this story will now take us. I have faith that Dan Slott is smart enough to bring us to a place that we haven't yet experienced with the character of Spider-Man. And for better or for worse, we've got it. This is where we are right now. We cannot undo this, at least for a little while. So my advice to all you Spider fans out there, first of all, stop with the fucking death threats, because you're just idiots, okay? It's a fucking fictional character, okay? When I heard they were going to kill when they killed Bruce Wayne, or when they killed Steve Rogers, or whatever, I mean, did I write angry letters of protest and complaint? No. I actually kept reading the book, and guess what? The book was really good for the most part. I wasn't too huge of a fan of the Dick Grayson Spider-Man or Batman stuff until really people like Snyder got involved. But I mean, there's hope here. And I think that cuts to the essence of what the character is. The character is about someone who fights against all odds. The book itself was something never meant to succeed. So, and it's become, you know, arguably the most famous comic book character of all time. You know, with maybe the exception of, well, certainly for Marvel, anyway. So, when all is said and done, I give this book really a 4.5 out of 5. Because, like I said, it's not perfect. There are some moments where it's like, But what is ultimately done here is to open the door in a really spectacular fashion for a whole new way of telling Spider-Man stories. It was very suspenseful. It was very smartly written. It was very well paced. The art by Humberto Ramos is starting to... I'm at that point where I'm starting to become a little bit ambivalent about it, because he does do extremely dynamic work, but then there are certain facial expressions where it's like, you know, like Mary Jane looking right at the panel, it's like, wow, that's almost kind of creepy. So like I said, it wasn't perfect, but for the build-up and the actual happening of it, this was really thumbs up all the way. So that's it. Agree, disagree, whatever. It's your right. You can say whatever you want. That's why there's a comment section down below. And you can agree with me, you can disagree with me, you can tell me what an idiot I am. I'm sure at least one or two of you will. But it's not going to change my mind. So, but I promise that as long as you're respectful of my opinions, I will be respectful of yours. So that's the bottom line, and that's it for this week's episode of New Comics, bitches! So, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. As of, well, maybe, but as of tonight, the contest is closed, by the way. We have 2 successful guesses as to the figures, the Avengers figures. However, one of them, and you know who you are, Mark, is you have a bit of a caveat in there. So you just take a look at your email or go to the video and you'll see what I'm talking about. But other than that, it's time to say goodnight and to put this whole issue to bed. So I want to thank you again for watching. Thank you for listening. If this is your first time here, please feel free to subscribe. I will not normally talk about a single issue as long as I talked about this one. But this is an issue that has supreme, you know, it has supreme significance in just about every way imaginable. So continue to tune in if you're new. If you're not new, then you obviously know how this works already. I'm going to talk for about, an hour and a half on a bunch of comic books. So, again, thank you for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. This is James Donnelly from the Shadow Gallery, signing off and reminding you, as always, to stay in the shadows. That's not quite working as well because I have the light on here, but that's okay. Bye-bye.